PLATHE. Welcome to Nepal Television. I am Siksha Sharma, and in this special interview session, I have with me UNESCO representative to Nepal, Mr. AXEL PLATHE. Mr. PLATHE, welcome to Nepal Television.
Thank you very much for having me.
Amidst deep political turmoil, Mr. PLATHE is about to successfully complete his tenure of nearly 4 years in Nepal. Nepal became the member of UNESCO in 1953, and over 60 years down the road, it has made remarkable progress in its areas of cooperation. Besides cultural and natural heritages, archaeology, language and education, UNESCO in Nepal is also overseeing the promotion of journalist, media right to freedom of expression and other areas of information and communication. We will be talking about UNESCO and Mr. PLATHE's achievement during the past few years in Nepal in this interview with Mr. PLATHE. Let me introduce you to Mr. PLATHE. Welcome to this special interview session.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to begin by asking, how do you rate the state of conservation in Nepal?
Well, we all know that Nepal has an excellent and extremely rich cultural heritage, and many things have been done in order to preserve that heritage. Nonetheless, the inscription of the World Heritage in the UNESCO World Heritage list, as you know, there are 2 cultural sites and 2 natural sites inscribed. The cultural sites are being Lumbini and the Kathmandu Valley with its 7 monument zones. Many people think there are much more than only these 2 sites, but in fact it's Kathmandu Valley is 1 site with 7 monument zones. I would say the state of conservation of, or at least the monuments and buildings inscribed in the list is quite satisfactory. There are many challenges, of course, but the fact that these sites are living sites where Nepalis, but also foreign visitors, foreign pilgrims are coming and to live daily with these sites contributes to a daily management which contributes to preservation and conservation of those sites. So we are quite satisfied with the conservation of these sites. Also because these sites are in the limelight, so they're really important sites globally, and Nepal is watched how these sites are being preserved. There are other sites that are in a less good status that is linked to lack of funds, lack of resources of the national authorities who have to oversee the preservation of those sites. But I would say in general it's in a quite good preservation state. What is urgently needed in Nepal is more human resources, conservation experts who are being able to maintain the tradition also that Nepal has in traditional crafts, for instance, wood carving, which are so important for many of the buildings, particularly here in the Kathmandu Valley and the Newar culture. So the efforts must be stepped up in the next years in order to create that human resource that is able to really maintain over the decades and centuries the heritage of the country.
And have the fund been utilized?
Well, and the funds, of course, funds need to be allocated by the government from the national budget. The international community is quite reluctant in providing funds for preservation activities per se, so that must be really included in the national budget. There must be innovative approaches to involve the private sector. The private sector has shown some interest in contributing to preserving some heritage sites in the Kathmandu Valley. I think private sector could do much more in order to support the government and the communities in preserving their sites. So I believe we need to look at innovative approaches to include other funding elements and the funding groups into preserving the heritage.
And has the funds been utilized?
Well, the funds are very limited. Government has not much resources, financial resources, in order to contribute to preservation. And I believe in the future we have to look at innovative funding options. And And I believe particularly the private sector has to be much more engaged in contributing to heritage preservation. For various reasons. That's about the country's identity. It's also about the country's economic well-being, because the rich heritage of Nepal makes its attractiveness, and that is what the people are coming for to Nepal. And the tourism industry, the culture industries are extremely important in the future for Nepal's economic development. So investment today in the preservation of culture will pay tomorrow by creating jobs, bringing more tourists into the country, tourists who are spending money, which then goes back into Nepal's economy.
And how do you see the government's committed towards preserving its heritages?
I believe the government takes it really seriously. In the term that I had the privilege to serve here, the government has not only looked after the preservation of the built heritage, the monuments and sites, but has also ratified the UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Heritage, which are more the traditions, performances, dances, songs of the different communities here. So I see in the fact that the government has ratified this convention and has very seriously, since almost 4 years that I'm here, worked in capacity building on preserving intangible heritage as an excellent sign for government's wish to preserve the country's cultural resources, both the tangible, the buildings, and the intangible. I said earlier, the issue is the issue about resources, the human capacity, financial resources. But I believe the political will is there. We are very happy to see also that in the draft constitution, which we hope will be carried on and will be finalized, there is a strong reference to the linguistic identities of the people. That's also about their culture. So that indicates also a political will by the political parties to put heritage, cultural identity at the very top of the agenda of the development of the country.
And has the political instability has had any effect, any impact on your work execution?
It had impact on our execution, sometimes on the day-to-day level. We had very good relations with the ministries and with the authorities who are working with us in the ministries of education, information communications, culture, tourism and civil aviation. But through the frequent change of ministers, of secretaries, up to the joint secretary level, we had some delays sometimes in project implementation. We had to explain several times to the incoming authorities what we are doing. So there was this kind of more implementation delay, but I don't think that that in reality our activities have been hampered by political instability. You know, we are working in UNESCO on a quite upstream level, so we are providing technical advice, which is very often geared towards the planning, the strategic development, in which the experts are much more important than the politicians. So the experts were there, even in political instability, and we have been able to work with them. The experts have to feed then, of course, the political level. We have to feed the political level as well. But so through this very technical approach that we are taking, we have been able to keep out more or less of the politics.
And can you describe about the UNESCO's mandate in Nepal?
We are working in order to contribute to development, as many of the UN agencies here and worldwide. We are working towards facilitating flows of information, of knowledge in the different areas, and we are doing that by assisting in improving, in helping improve the education sector, in looking after cultural issues. You just described them, the preservation of cultural heritage, in promoting freedom of expression, in promoting access to information, to the right to information. So we are working in these three areas. I should add, we work also in the area of sciences. That's also the knowledge area. So we're working in order to enhance knowledge and skills in order to contribute to development. That's fair and square within UNESCO's mandate. That's for this reason UNESCO was created after the Second World War, in order to increase understanding among people, among communities, among members of communities, to coexist in a peaceful and fruitful way. So that's what we are doing globally. That was what UNESCO is doing here in Nepal.
Through the medium of information and communication.
Through the medium of information, through the medium of education. Education is in a way knowledge sharing or information sharing. And when I say education, that's not only education for the children, it's not only primary or secondary education, it's education that is lifelong. Today we learn every day new skills, we learn new technologies, you know how to use the new technologies. We are very mobile in our working place. We are switching from one job to the other. So adults have to learn strategies in order to be able to adapt to this ever-changing environment. So learning is a lifelong learning process. And that's also one of the areas in which we are working here in order to broaden the idea of education, to broaden it up to non-formal ways of educating people, which is very important in a country like Nepal, where we have many illiterates, which is a major development issue. And that is also a lifelong learning process, because the women who are illiterate are being trained in life skills as they are being trained in reading and writing. So they're linking this lifelong learning approach to learning to read and write. It's a very broad concept of education that we try to promote, and in which we try to provide technical assistance to the government.
And talking about information, communication and freedom of expression, how do you see the state of press freedom here in Nepal?
I'm amazed by the variety and vibrance of the media sector in Nepal. There are so many newspapers, there's exceptionally a high number of community radio stations, which, by the way, UNESCO, this movement that was started in the 90s, has received a lot of support from UNESCO at that time. There are television stations like yours and like others. There is the vibrant media landscape. At the first glance, you would say a great country for freedom of expression. Everything can be said. The online media are flourishing now. There are many tweets, many blogs. And that's probably correct. There is a possibility for people to express themselves, for media to speak out, for journalists to write what they want. But there is another side of the coin, that is the strong influence, political influence, that is being taken on many media outlets. That these influences are hidden, sometimes not seen. They are linked to funding issues, but they are also linked to issues of security, individual security of the journalists, who are threatened and who are retiring in a kind of self-censorship.
Just for writing news,
writing
or disseminating the news.
Yes, for writing news, they would not write what they would normally write, because they fear to be threatened and to fear to be physically aggressed. So we have to very carefully balance our analysis and to not be blinded by this great variety of media outlets. There are issues that are serious, that are linked to safety of journalists, which in turn threaten the freedom of expression.
And now moving on to public service broadcasting in Nepal. What do you see the role of PSB in the future of Nepal television? As you laid most emphasis on PSB during your tenure. It
is important to have a space in which information and knowledge can be shared that is free from influence, free and independent, non-partisan. And we in UNESCO believe that the public service broadcasting, both for television and for radio, is a means to ensure that free space, this public domain in which people can speak up without being influenced by economical or political interests. So I believe it would be very interesting to work more on transforming, or rather than transforming, creating an environment in which public service broadcasting is possible, in which neither government nor private enterprises nor political parties take an influence on programming, on content that is being disseminated, on selection of journalists, but that is being done in a transparent, open way through self-regulation mechanisms that have to be codified and written. But I believe it is time for Nepal to look at public service broadcasting as a modern way to provide independent and free media services to the citizens of Nepal.
And calls are reverberated at different forums to make Nepal Television and other state-run medias into a PSB. And how far UNESCO has been able to progress with assisting the government?
We had 3 years ago, I believe, we had proposed to the government an initial concept outline of a public service broadcasting law, which is still there. It needs to be discussed. We have been speaking to some of the leaders in the media area on possibilities to sensitize particularly the politicians, but also government members about what public service broadcasting is, because I believe there's a certain lack of knowledge of the decision makers what public service broadcasting is and how it could contribute to Nepal's vibrant media landscape. So we are in this process of looking at possibilities for promoting the idea of public service broadcasting. It is ultimately a decision of Nepal, of course, of the stakeholders in Nepal, how to go forward with the process, how to change legislation. What we can do in the international community is to promote the discussion, to provide model legislation, to explain the concept of public service broadcasting, which we are doing, and not only UNESCO is doing that, there are other international actors who are involved in that. And I think we should continue doing this. We should partner with other development partners working in that area, but we need political backing. Without political backing, nothing will happen, and I hope that the new Constituent Assembly will take that on. It maybe not in the next months as an immediate action, because there are other priorities, but in course of this legislature, the issue of media law and public service broadcasting could be taken up.
All right. And what has been the most memorable achievement that you think you made during the past 4 years, in Nepal especially?
Oh, that's very difficult to say. I must say that I was extremely privileged to serve in Nepal because of its beauty, the kindness of the people, the facility to work with our Nepali counterparts. So it's very difficult to single out one or the other achievement, which, by the way, would never be my achievement, because that would be achievement of our office, and indeed the achievement that we have done together with our national partners in government and non-governmental organizations. But I can say that maybe I was very, very privileged to work very much about Lumbini and preserving, contributing to preserve Lumbini, to put Lumbini more on the map, on the global map also, so that the importance of Lumbini with its very unique symbolic value for peace and understanding can be harnessed for not only for Nepal, for the global community. And I would say this could be described as one of the achievements UNESCO did in the last 4 years, that we were able to promote Lumbini more. But there are other areas. We have been working in education very much to help curbing illiteracy. We are not yet there that we can halve the literacy rate by 2015, as that is expected by Education for All goals. But we have done quite well, good achievements thanks to the excellent cooperation with the Non-Formal Education Center of the Ministry of Education to build solid bases for increasing literacy in the country. Maybe a last point, I was very proud also, that is again about conservation, as we started our discussion about conservation, that during 2013 the two very first items, two manuscripts from the Kaiser Library and the National Archives were inscribed in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. One is a Ayurvedic manuscript, the other one is a Tantric manuscript, so that forms now part of the world heritage of documentary elements, and that's also a nice achievement that indicates also how rich Nepal's heritage is.
Well, with this, we were so glad to have you in our studio, and it's time for us to wrap up. That was Mr. AXEL PLATHE, the UNESCO representative to Nepal. Thank you, Mr. PLATHE, for sharing your valuable time with us and highlighting the organization's further initiatives in Nepal. We would like to wish you a success in your future tenure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And from all of us here in the studio, thank you and bye-bye.